throughout these last 3 weeks. You would think that that's commonplace, but in the third county court here, it's normal for them to do that, and we're very, very appreciative for that. We also want to thank you for your service. We told you this was a big and important case, and it's the most important case going on in the country right now. Millions of parents this past week and then in the following week are going to send their kids to school. And your verdict will help define how safe those kids can feel in school. We told you at the very beginning, this case was about justice and it's about accountability. We're here because they have refused to accept any responsibility. It was their son, under their roof, with their guns, who went and committed this mass shooting. So you have two jobs. Number one is your job is to answer the questions that the judge has given you, that long list. And the second job that you have is to answer your other jurors' questions. So what we're going to go through now is some of the important instructions and then some of the evidence to help you and guide you along the way. So the first thing is the court tells you that this is a civil case. And so the standard governing you is preponderance of the evidence. That means just more likely true than not true. Now, we've proven our case by way more than a preponderance of the evidence in this case, but that's all that we have to do, just ever so slightly. So then we get to, let me back up to question number one. Did Demetrius Pagourtzis commit an assault on each and every one of those persons listed? And a person commits an assault if he intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causes bodily injury to another. So let's look at how the court told you what the definition of intent is. A person acts with intentionally or with intent with respect to the nature of his conduct or to a result of his conduct when it is his conscious objective or desire to engage in the conduct or cause the result. That's the definition. Here, we told you at the beginning of this case, this was a premeditated murder. Demetrius Pagourtzis planned this. He intended, with the way that he did it, to inflict as much damage as what he could. You heard from their doctor yesterday saying he chose the art room so that people would be trapped in there. He chose the art room so that the police couldn't get to him, so that they would have to come through the door to him. So when we look at the slide here, first, he wore a Born to Kill t-shirt. That's good evidence of intent. Then when we start looking at his journals, he says, you want a motive? How about because the idea of pumping my classmates full of buckshot and watching them writhe on the ground in agony is an exhilarating thought. His intent was to do just what he did. And then we keep going with his writings. And I kept doing this, and we kept doing this. We said, none of the words, these aren't our words, these are all their words and Demetrius's words. Every single thing that we've proven to you in the case comes out of their mouth or Demetrius' mouth. He says what he's going to do could be incredibly minuscule. I will have destroyed bloodlines spanning thousands of years. He knew the consequence of what he was trying to do. Writing after writing. You are cruel and unforgiving, and soon I will be too. I guess you all thought my problems were either funny or burden. Well, now it's your burden to bear, and we'll see who's laughing when I'm done. Have you ever wanted to murder someone? F yes. Goal before you die, to kill people. What's your claim to fame? Killing a bunch of people. So the answer to the first question with regard to each one of these plaintiffs is yes, yes, yes. Every single one of them. Now somebody may get back there and say, well, what about insanity? And so what I would remind that person is the court told you that to answer this question, yes, you have to find that he intended to do what it was that he did. And he went to the school with bombs and guns, and he shot and killed people. That is intent. We'll get to insanity in a little bit, but that is intent. Now let's look at the next question. Did the negligence of any of those below proximately cause the occurrence in question? Antonios, Rose, and Lucky Gunner. Yes, yes, and yes. Back on April 20th of 1999, when Columbine happened, it made certain for all of us who are parents that we know several things. We know that school shootings occur. We know that mental health problems exist. And we know that we have, as responsible gun owners, to safely secure our guns. That's commonplace. Ordinary people know that now. So the judge defines negligence as meaning failing to do that which a person of ordinary prudence would have done under the same or similar circumstances, or doing that which a person of ordinary prudence would not have done under the same or similar circumstances. Ordinary care means that degree of care that a person of ordinary prudence would use under the same or similar circumstances. Proximate cause means that cause which in a natural and continuous sequence produces an event and without which such event would not have occurred. In order to be a proximate cause, the act or omission complained of must be such that a person using ordinary care would have foreseen that the event or some similar event might reasonably result therefrom. There may be more than one proximate cause of an event. So let's get back to how we started this case. We said parents of a depressed child should safely store their guns. That's where we started in this case during opening. Then we started seeing from voir dire, they said, you don't know what you don't know. That's what they told us. But here's what we all knew, that Antonios knew, and this is his trial testimony. What we can agree upon is that if parents know a child has a mental illness, whether it's depression, anxiety, whatever kind of mental illness it is, it's that parent's job to get that child help. Yes. They also knew, and again, this is from the trial in this case, that it is their responsibility to safely store their guns. Both of them testified to that. The first one was Antonios, the second one was Rosemarie. During opening, they said, Miss Laird said, there were not any signs that were noticeable. That's what she said. She said there weren't any what we would call red flags that anyone saw. And then she said if there had been any signs before this happened, they would have acted. That's what ordinarily prudent people would have done. July 29th, 3 weeks ago. So, what we did in this case during opening is we put up the email from November of 2017 that showed that Rosemarie wrote to Santa Fe to say, you want to know what's going on in their household? You don't have to trust us. She's writing it. And she says, I thought he was coping well enough. Boy, was I wrong. And then she says, she's really busy and has massive guilt, but she says, Thanksgiving just got even more depressing. And then she says, please know he is in some extraordinary circumstances currently. This is what they knew. This is why we were saying that they knew or should have known that stuff was going on with him. That's what ordinary care is. So then we also said they knew or should have known that something was going on with Demetrius and to get him help because he wrote this. And remember what their doctor said. He said that Demetrius said he overslept a couple of days. So if you want to understand why it says yesterday and why Demetrius says in the confession it was Tuesday. That's why it was a couple of days before. But the important thing for us to remember here is that Demetrius said, do you know what she told me the day before? Why are you acting like this? Are you depressed? And he puts it in all quotes. And when y'all get back there and read exhibit number 1, you're going to see he only puts a couple of things in quotes. And then he goes to point out why he says, this is not a context, this is word for word. He knew they would come in and say that they didn't know. And that's exactly what they did in our case. Just 6 weeks ago, and that's why I walked up to Rose Marie when I was questioning her, and I said, ma'am, when I took your deposition, you said 6 weeks ago that there were no signs or symptoms of any emotional or mental issues with Demetrius prior to the shooting. And she said there were none. And then, August 10th, we get the report of Dr. Bradley Peterson, meaning just a few days ago, where Rose Marie and Antonios told the doctor that they knew something was wrong, but they did not know how to fix it. They did nothing. That is not ordinary care. Ordinary care says, as their lawyer told you, if they would have seen a sign, they would have acted. They did nothing. So, we went through these red flags with you to prove that ordinarily prudent people, seeing what it was that they saw or should have saw, would have seen all of these red flags. And we put these up during opening because we didn't know that she had actually told the doctor that they knew, because we were going to say, how could you not know with everything that's going on? Because they said when Demetrius wrote that, they said their son was lying about what his mom said. But we wanted to show you they knew. Because 57 unexcused absences, 36 tardies, and failing courses, and these were documented on his report card. They described her as a helicopter mom. Now, 57 absences, something should be done, and it should be done quick. They knew. Then, physically, they told their doctor, again, all of these words are coming from them, not us, that his hygiene declined. He rarely showered. His hair became greasy. We had some statements, and these don't come from the parents, but from his classmates saying he dressed like the Columbine shooter. His mom bought him the trench coat. He wore combat boots, which were in his room. He wore all black, and he had the Born to Kill t-shirt. Socially, he grew even quieter. He isolated in his room. He didn't want to go anywhere. He publicly posted 18 days beforehand the Born to Kill t-shirt and the trench coat. Financially, a 17-year-old with no job is spending $1,722 and having 29 separate deliveries of items that would scare any prudent or ordinary parent to death when they saw those things. And I don't know about you guys, but Amazon doesn't show up every day at the same time. They show up at different times with packages. And then there were 2 deliveries, again, to the front steps of their house of ammunition that he wasn't supposed to have. March 2nd is when that was. Here are some of those purchases. Now, mentally, he hated how he was treated at school. They knew some of that. He hated how he was treated at home. Now remember, part of what Demetrius says down where he says his mother asked him why he was acting this way, he said he was tired of the constant threats of abuse. And they said that he was delusional. None of that was true. That's what they told us. Except for when we heard from the doctor, what they're telling the doctor, they say the dad is filled with rage. He had these extreme outbursts. through things. And Rose even threatened to divorce him. And she told us they had a happy marriage. That's what she said under oath. You guys are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses. That's why we kept saying these things. Like when I put the deal up and she said it looked like a pressure washer. Just because you look at that, you guys have to judge whether you can trust what it is that they tell you. He was drinking. He took the guns so they would notice. That's his words. He was building bombs in their trailer. He was building bombs at their house. He detonated a bomb in their garage. And after all of this, they didn't safely store their guns. They did not get him help, and they didn't safely store their guns. So, if you recall from the confession, Captain Meadows says, he asks a couple of questions of Demetrius. And he says, Demetrius tells him, I got them from the wooden display cabinet. I got them with keys. And I put the shotgun in my mouth before the kid at Santa Fe ever even committed suicide. That's January 30th. So we knew he had the guns for 4 months. Now, what Captain Meadows didn't ask him is, where did you get the keys from? That's where Dr. Peterson comes in. Once again, Demetrius told Dr. Peterson, their $600 an hour expert, that the gun cabinet in the house had the key on the top. That's what Demetrius said. That's the only proof of what Demetrius said that's not filtered through them. Remember, they said a couple of weeks ago, Demetrius told him he searched for months around the house to find the keys. 6 years later, that's what they say. But that's not what Demetrius told the doctor within 11 months of the shooting. Now, this is where he said he put them. They acknowledged that it is irresponsible if those keys were on the top of that cabinet. That's Rosemarie's trial testimony. It's irresponsible. Antonio said the same thing. It's irresponsible. Now, what they said was, well, he didn't know that he was delusional. He didn't know. These things can't be true. Except for when we look back at all of the things he told Captain Meadows where they were at so that they could come search the house and stuff afterwards, he was telling them the truth. The shotguns were in the closet. He even told Dr. Peterson 11 months after this happened the model of the shotgun, and when you go back and pull these photographs up, it was exactly the model and brand that he told Dr. Peterson 11 months later. He told Captain Meadows there were 22 shells in the black storage cabinet. He was right about that. He told Captain Meadows he kept a journal in his room that laid everything out. There it was. He told Captain Meadows that he had bomb-making materials in the trailer and that he had 3 pieces of paper. I've only got 2 pictured here, but the other one is the bell schedule. They were there. He told him that he, Demetrius, was keeping bomb materials in the gun locker. So Demetrius said, this is where he took, and he was consistent about it. He never said anything any differently. He took the shotguns from this display cabinet. This is the same display cabinet that has 12 slots for guns. He took 3, and when you count them, there's 9 guns. What Demetrius is saying adds up. He also said he took them 4 months before so that they would notice. So even if they're storing the keys up in the kitchen where they say, Antonio said, I walked in here every day. I would have seen that these were missing. And he said they weren't missing. He said there was nothing missing in the black gun locker where Dimitri had the bomb-making materials. This is Dimitri. When you look at his confession, he says there's no way nobody is effing noticing this. In other words, he was saying, there's no way they could be missing this. I'm taking them so that they will know. So, when we get to, did the negligence of any of those proximately cause the occurrence in question? Yes. They didn't get him help. He was under their roof. And they didn't safely secure their guns. If you believe Demetrius, they were out of their own mouth where they left the keys. It was irresponsible. Irresponsible. So yes and yes. Now let's talk about Lucky Gunner. Lucky Gunner sold to a 17-year-old. All he had to do was click a box. They provided the ammunition. Their negligence, that is not using, ordinarily prudent persons would not do that. And so they also are responsible. It's yes, yes, and yes. What percentage of the fault should you assign? So this is up to you guys. Here's what we would say. The fault that should be assigned is 30% to Antonios, 30% to Rosemarie, 30% to Demetrius, and 10% to Lucky Gunner. The family shares the responsibility, and Lucky Gunner has some too. If y'all feel like the percentage should be different, change the percentage, but they all share the responsibility. Now, you will notice when you get back there, question 4, when you start to figure out how much it will take to compensate all of them for what it is that they were subjected to, the court says insanity means that he didn't know his conduct was wrong. And it says insanity, here's what insanity means for purposes of this case. You may consider it as a mitigating factor in answering damages. Okay? So let's just talk about it briefly. Here's how we know from the writing right beforehand that Demetrius knew what he was doing was wrong. Now, when you look at this, you're going to think, he doesn't have thought disorder here, because this is written right beforehand, and this is pretty impressive writing. So he says, in the first paragraph written right beforehand, he was going to get into law enforcement. Well, if you know that you're going to enforce laws, you know what it is, the difference between what's legal and what's not. And this is his writing once again. Then he says he wanted to rape and kill as many women as he could before I was caught. Well, if you didn't know what you're doing is wrong, how would you know you would get caught doing it? And then the third thing, once again, these are all clues in his own writing, is in the last paragraph, he was upset at his dad because he was kicking the dog so he was upset at him for doing something to the dog when the dog had done nothing wrong. So this insanity defense, he knew when he went to the school that what he was doing was wrong. And how do we know that? Because he also said, and you heard his doctor say this, his doctor said he planned it to where the police would have to come into the room to get him. Well, how does he know the police is going to be there unless a person who's really insane does not know that what they're really doing is wrong? But he knew the police were going to be coming for him. So, here are the victims that we represent when you start going through this chart. Now, what you will see and what you're going to hear, and what you did hear, I mean, is that there's not even a word in the English dictionary for a parent who loses their child. That is the worst harm imaginable. It sticks with you for every minute of every day for the rest of your life. And these people were subjected to that, and they're going to deal with that for the rest of their lives. Then you hear from those who were shot. And you see that their lives prior to May 18th have been taken from them. Their life is no longer the same. You heard Flo Rice, she was shot in both legs. She's hypervigilant. She can't even go out to eat without turning her back. And sometimes, when we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, people think, well, you can't see it. But let me remind you of how real this was. We had grown police officers, 6'3", 6 years after this happened, shaking like a leaf up here. I believe every single police officer cried when they got up on the stand. That shows you the enormity of the trauma and the torment that all of these families were subjected to. Now, this is Demetrius writing beforehand. What I do will both have an immeasurable impact and be incredibly minuscule. I will have destroyed bloodlines spanning thousands of years. And then he goes on to say, the lives of those, and we'll never know what those lives will become. He knew what he was doing, but we disagree with him. These losses are measurable, and they're not minuscule. And we told y'all that to start. The losses in this case are enormous. And so on behalf of all of our clients, they have given us, and they have told us in this case, that they are united and that they are strong, and that when y'all answer these damage questions, the amount that you award to the lowest one, they want to share in that. In other words, they don't want to burden you guys with having to pick and choose, because they realize that their losses are different. But they stand united and say, provide us complete compensation, and whatever you find the complete compensation is for the least will work for the rest of us. It's not the number, it's the message. And so when you look at what Demetrius's actions and Lucky Gunner's actions and the parents' actions caused, that's 943 years of damage. And I'm reminded, and when Chris Stone got up on the stand and he talked about going into Les Miserables, or Les Miserables as us people from Santa Fe call it, and he quoted the song that he has on his arm, and it says, there's a grief that can't be spoken, there's a pain that goes on and on. Empty chairs at empty tables, now my friends are dead and gone. Oh, my friends, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Empty chairs at empty tables, where my friends will sing no more. And that got me, because you can feel the loss that Chris and the rest of these had. Every waking moment is agony for them. And so, the shooter said we couldn't measure it. We can measure it. Complete compensation. Anything less than complete is incomplete, and it's unjust. So Dr. Bradley testifies at $600 an hour. That equates to $10 a minute. Each of us live our lives minute by minute. The shooting was 30 minutes, but we measure our time second by second and minute by minute. Time is all we're given. And so if we take just a fourth of that and multiply that times the years lost, that is $1.2 billion. When you average that out over these plaintiffs, that's $25 million for every blank that you fill out. If you feel like that number should be less, then put the number in. If you feel like it should be 23 million per blank, because there were 23 victims in this case, put 23 million. But understand that we had to put each of these witnesses up there so that you could see and hear and feel what it is that they have gone through and will continue to go through. So, thank you, Judge. So each one of these parents out here that lost a child is being asked this question. What amount of money will fairly and reasonably compensate them for losing their child? The worst pain imaginable. And so for each one of these blanks, $25 million for each one of them. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And that's why the first thing we told you when we were picking this jury was the judge is going to tell you, do not let bias, sympathy, or prejudice play any role in your deliberations. And so when you measure how much harms and losses they have, and the numbers add up to a lot, don't have any sympathy over there when you're filling those numbers out. Don't have any mercy, like Demetrius said he was going to have no mercy on the unsuspecting, innocent victims that he took out that day. No mercy. And so for each of these, it's easy. 25 million. If you think that that's too much, then put a figure in there that's less. If you think it's not enough, put a figure in there that's more. Each one. Now this one is the injuries. Same deal. This is Flo Rice. And Flo is back there. And you will notice some of these plaintiffs didn't come every day because it was too emotionally draining for them to hear this day after day after day. But I'm glad they're here today. They've been a tremendous support system for me. 25 million, each blank. And that goes for Flo Rice, that goes for Trenton Beasley, that goes for Chase Yarborough, that goes for Clayton Horn, that goes for each one of them. Now, one of the questions the judge told you is, do you find, it's going to be number 22, do you find by clear and convincing evidence that the harm listed to each one of these was the result of malice? Yes. Look at his own writing. This fact of Natasha, let me talk with you about Natasha. The game Wolfenstein, that was the character in Wolfenstein. The MK Ultra, you're going to see cell phone searches for what is MK Ultra, followed by a whole bunch of playing of Rainbow Six, the video game where the CIA is in it. Not one mention, when you get back there, not one of Natasha or the CIA, which he supposedly met in 8th grade. He wrote a whole lot of stuff without saying Natasha or the CIA. What sum of money should be assessed against Demetrius Pagourtzis as exemplary damages? We're going to let you decide this one. Decide how much of a punishment. This is the accountability that Demetrius Pagourtzis is going to get. This right here. What will it take so that the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of Pakistan, a country of 200 million people, 8,500 miles away, will hear what it is when they send their foreign exchange student over here and she comes back and they have to meet her at the airport? Your verdict needs to be heard. So the answer to these questions are yes. You determine how much. We heard with just a little whisper, they would come running. Well, we don't need a whisper. We need a shout. Shout so that all across everywhere will know, get mental help. Know what's going on in your home. Safely store your weapons. We can't send our kids to school and bring them home in body bags. The first line of defense is parents. We want to solve this problem. It starts right at home. You're responsible for your kids. If you're going to bring them into the world, be responsible for them. If you're going to bring weapons into your home, be responsible for them. If we don't do something, nothing is going to happen. And so we roll through. And I've got 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to go through and just remind you of the tremendous honor, and why me, I don't know. But the honor that I have to speak on these people's behalf. It is the best thing in my life. He's a hero. He knew by grabbing that door when Demetrius was grabbing it, he told the others to run, and Demetrius shot him through the door while he was letting other people run. If a hero isn't worth $150 million, I don't know what is. And then that's followed up by another one. Christian Riley Garcia. When you love your kids and you treat them right and you monitor them and you provide a great environment for them, this is what you get. You get the Christian Riley Garcias of the world. And Aaron Kyle McLeod, you heard from Gail McLeod about what a fine, upstanding young man this was. He got hit in the arm and bled out for 5 minutes while he was text messaging his sister, who has to live with that for the rest of her life. She got to tell him she loved him, and he told her he loved her back, but no young sister should have to do that one hallway away from her brother at the high school. Jared Connor Black, the protector. This was Pam's son. The protector. He had Asperger's, and he protected those that were less fortunate than him. What an inspiration. Flo Rice, one of my heroes. She got shot in both legs. She watched as her fellow substitute teacher died. She heard every dripping glass and thought that it was the shooter coming back, shooting again. She was being hunted. And what did she do? She survived. But not without these scars that leave her. And you know what? She's got such a great support system and a great daughter, but she is a true inspiration. And Clayton Horn, what can you say about this kid? The shooter shot him and then stood over him to finish him off. And fortunately, he kicked up at the last minute, and it went through his arm, and he survived. And he told his mom and dad, who'd been out there every day, I'm going to get back to doing what everything I did beforehand. He got on a bull. He did pole vaulting. He has moved on, but he carries this around. And you saw him. I was so proud of him because he's so positive. He is one of the few that just isn't emotionally devastated by this. But you know what tore him up? Was when he said he met Chris Stone in first grade. And he said, that kid would give you the shirt off his back. He said, that kid was the best kid that I've ever met. Best person I've ever met to this day. And when you hear and you saw his dad get up and take the stand, you know why that is. So I'm going to sit down now, and I'm going to let these other lawyers get up and talk with you about their clients. And then I'll be back up to talk in a little while. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Good afternoon. I also want to thank you for your patience and your dedication in listening to all the evidence. Chase Yarborough's life was miraculously spared on May 18th, 2018. The doctors told him at the hospital that God kept him alive for big things. Chase believes this, and everyone who knows Chase believes it as well. Chase is a survivor. He is grateful. Every day since May 18th, Chase is physically and psychologically reminded of that preventable massacre. He faces every challenge with courage, grace, and faith. May 18th was the last day that Chase Yarborough woke up, carefree, stress-free teenager. Chase described himself as funny, as outgoing. He liked to joke around. He loved his friends and his family. He was planning on going to college, and he would have been, now is, the first generation to attend college. He was so proud. Chase is an only child, raised by loving, involved, nurturing parents. They knew when Chase was sad. They knew when he was happy. They knew when he was struggled. Chase didn't have to tell them, they knew. May 18th was also the last day that Chase woke up without lead projectiles embedded and resting in his body. On May 18th, 2018, Chase was shot in the kiln closet with his other friends. He didn't know he was shot, and he escaped, and he ran, and he got out of that building. He called his father and told his dad, there's a shooter. His dad said, run, run, and Chase ran until he couldn't run any longer. And his ankle gave way, and he crawled to a ditch because he thought the shooter was chasing him. Now, when he went to the hospital, he was told that he was in fact shot. He was shot in the head. He was shot in the back. He was shot in the arm. He had grazes, bullet grazes on his temple and on his other arm. The doctors told him the projectiles have to stay because it's going to be too dangerous and too risky to remove him, and they sent him home. Chase gets home. Not shortly thereafter, the hospital calls and tells them, bring Chase back immediately. They pack up and they go back to the hospital. Chase thought he was dying. When he got to the hospital, they rushed him in and they did additional testing. And they told him that he has a projectile, a lead projectile in his heart. The doctors didn't know how it got there. They said how you're alive is a miracle. They believed that the wound on his neck, that a projectile went into his neck, and the heat from it then cauterized the artery after it went into the artery. The projectile traveled through his bloodstream and is in his heart, where it stays today. Every day, Chase is reminded of this shooting. He's got a bullet in his head that he feels every time he washes his hair. He sees the scars from the bullet wounds, and he feels them. He feels the pain every day, every single day. Now, Dr. Peterson was talking about subjective and objective. Let's look at what objective is. Objective are those bullets in his heart and his head. Chase was diagnosed with PTSD. We understand why. Chase will never live a carefree life again. He will live with a shattered heart for the rest of his life.
I'm going to move fast because we're running a little bit short on time, but my name is Blake Yapfel, and I represent Trenton Beasley. And I'll echo what Mr. McGuire said, in that we need to send a message. And one of my favorite lines ever is, and I'm going to tweak it a little bit, if you think you're too small to send a message, try spending the night in Galveston outside without a mosquito net. The truth of the matter is, unless we've walked in those shoes of a parent whose child has been murdered, or in a survivor of a shooting like this, we can't know the depth and the magnitude of the grief they felt. So I won't tell you that I know the magnitude of that grief. What I will tell you is a little about Trent. Trent was a 15-year-old boy who loved baseball, who loved fishing, and who loved talking about baseball and fishing. And on May 18th, that all changed. On May 18th, he heard 3 shots. Out of fear and not knowing what that was, he rushed to the patio door that was locked with his classmates. He then turned to the kiln room and had to break it with his friend Hunter so that they could all get inside. Problem is, once it was broken, they were trapped in a room with an open door. Trent laid in that room with his friends, attempting to barricade that door with the kiln, as a shotgun barrel went off over and over in that room beside his head. He laid in that room with his friends as they were shot and as they were killed. He lay in that room, helpless, as he listened to Chris Stone take his last breath. And he laid in that room, preparing for those last breaths to be his. I believe that while we can't know that magnitude of that grief, we do know, based on the evidence in this case, that it's a burden of grief that will last for the rest of all of these people's lives. My prayer, and I think the best we can hope for, is that your decision and your verdict in this case will make that burden of that grief just a little easier to bear, knowing that the responsibility for the incident on May 18th, for the shooting on May 18th, has been delegated and assigned. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is James Miller. I'm the attorney for Farah Naz and Abdul Aziz, who are the parents of Sabika Sheikh, the 17-year-old Pakistani exchange student who was sent here to learn and who died in the closet of the art room at Santa Fe High School on May 18th. On their behalf, because they can't be here to thank you in person, I thank you for your service on this jury today. Sabika, when she died, was preparing for a lifetime of service herself. She wanted to grow up to be a diplomat, to build bridges between Pakistan, her home country, and other countries. That's why she came to America on a scholarship to study. She beat out 7,000 other students for a spot in that exchange program to spend 10 months studying at an American high school, living with an American family. That tells you something about how remarkable she was. How many other kids have the courage and the commitment at age 16 to pursue their dreams and study more than 8,000 miles from home in a country they have never visited, with a language and a culture so different from their own? Sabika had that courage and that drive. You heard her parents say how thrilled they were, how proud, yet at the same time how anxious about letting her go. Abdul, her father, spoke about the sacrifice that that family made as parents to let their oldest daughter pursue her dreams. They had no idea the depth of that sacrifice. In America, Sabika had a successful year. She made friends, She was an excellent student growing up, and she was an excellent student here in America. She spoke to her family almost every single day. But by May, she was ready to come home. She was just 19 days away from coming home. And both she and her parents were counting down the days. They were celebrating Ramadan. She would call them, even though the family was 10 hours away, to break the fast with them, to keep the faith with her family. She missed the food from home. You heard her dad say. She liked biryani rice. She was looking forward to that. Farah and Abdul, like so many of the parents we heard from, described the confusion and the rising panic and the helplessness of May 18th when they learned there was a shooting at their child's school and they couldn't reach them. The helplessness that these parents felt was compounded by being a half a world away. And eventually, Mr. Aziz spoke to Sabika's homestay father and heard in broken English the words that have burned into his mind, "Sabika is no more." When her body came back to Karachi 5 days later, a crowd of hundreds was waiting for her at the airport, and an honor guard from the Pakistani army. The president and the prime minister of that country visited Sabika's parents to pay their respect to this remarkable child. Sabika came to America full of hopes and dreams and ambitions, and she came home in a casket. She did not deserve to die like that. And on behalf of her parents, I am asking you to hold these defendants accountable for her death. I'll close with the words of her mother. She was my oldest child. She was my friend. She had a lot of dreams, and not a day passes I don't miss her.
Cynthia Tisdale, a vibrant, loving, caring, 63-year-old woman when her life was taken. Let me tell you about degrees that mattered. We heard about doctors with degrees. Let me talk about the degrees that mattered, especially to her. She was a wife. She was a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, a teacher, a friend. She didn't work out of necessity. She worked to provide these children a difference, to teach lessons about life and love. Her life was taken so short, robbing her family, this community, of love that she could give, lessons she could teach. Her husband, William, she was the caregiver for him. Upon her passing, he gave up his ghost to go join her. The last words that she ever wrote were the words that they shared in life, that they shared with their family. 3 words, the most powerful, enduring. I love you. It's what should have been said and spoken more often. Reese Tisdale, you saw him take the stand. He spoke on his behalf, on behalf of his family. They are all devastated. Instead of sharing relationships and talking with their mother about what's going on at their homes and on celebrations, they do it at the cemetery. Jennifer, Reese's wife, she taught in our schools. She had to give it up. The pain was so bad. Reese, he was there. He's forever haunted by what he saw and what he couldn't do. He's plagued by anguish, depression, grief, despair. His life was spent in service to us in our community, to serve and protect. On that day, he couldn't protect his mother. He couldn't protect those kids. As a result, he eventually gave up the force. He couldn't handle the pain anymore. He wanted to find a way to bring joy into people's lives. He wanted to find some still waters to walk behind or beside. He talked about how he was grown up and raised. His dad said, raise up a child in the way you want him to go. It's the way he did it. It's the way his kids turned out. It all starts at home. It started at their home. They had the responsibility, among other things, to protect the keys, to protect the guns. The book of Romans has a chapter about lessons. It says the lessons that were written to teach, to provide encouragement and hope for a better today and a brighter tomorrow. What are the lessons we've learned here? Do not let what was taught here be forgotten. Use the lessons of these lives, of these people, to make a difference, an impact, to provide teachings and encouragement for hope of a better today, a brighter tomorrow. On behalf of the Tisdale family, all of these families, help us make a difference. Help us protect our teachers, our students, our families, our friends, our children. Do not let them suffer the pain of the lessons that we, unfortunately, have now had to endure. By and with your verdict, stand united with us to make a difference. Be our voice. Be Cynthia Tisdale's voice. Help her teach one more lesson, a lesson of responsibility and accountability. Make your lesson be bold. Make it be strong. Let it be Santa Fe strong.
May 18, 2018 is Rhonda Hart's every day. She got up at 4:30 that morning to go to her bus route. The job her dad had, the job she liked. She liked being around kids. She's on her route. She's coming back. She finds out there's something's going on at the school. They say, come back, park in the back. She goes back and she's beginning to wonder, but she's following orders. She'd been in the military. She starts asking people what's going on. There was a shooting. She started wondering about Kimberly. She texts her, no response. She really starts worrying then, asking others. And remember when she saw Isabella Lamance, the girl that had been on her bus, she called her her girl. She wrapped her arms around her, holding her, takes her to a bus, sits on the second seat. In just a minute, what does Isabella say? Miss Rhonda, we think Kimberly's dead. Rhonda didn't want to believe that. Why would you? And she waits hours. She goes to the unification building where all the parents are. And slowly by slowly, as parents find their child, they leave, and then a group of parents is left. They're sent to another building, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Can you imagine what that time must have been like? Knowing that a shooting has occurred, your child's not answering their phone, and you're sent to a room, someone comes walking in and says, what clothes did she wear? They tell her, she's dead. Even then, the shock, the pain, the misery, there's no way that this could be true, but it was true. She winds up going to the funeral home, and remember that Kimberly was covered up to here. For a year, Rhonda couldn't even function. Her father had to cook meals. She really wanted to be with Kimberly, but she had Tyler to take care of. She's been in therapy ever since at VA, but she's tried to make a difference also. You heard about the act that she got passed through the House of Representatives, sitting on some senator's desk, I guess, because that's what they do up there. They don't do anything, but you can do something, and you can be heard to Washington, D.C. It is distasteful for me to talk about money and life. You could fill this room full of money. Each one of these parents want their child back. But money is all that you can award. That's all. Nobody goes to jail. It's money. But your money will say something. It's not what it is, but what does it say? And it needs to be heard loudly. I'm going to sit down a minute, but there's some little administrative things I want to go over with you. You recall the court in the court's charge said 10-2. That means that 10 of you, to reach a verdict on these issues, 10 can agree. Now, if it's a different 10, let's say 10 answer one way, and then you get to another question, and 2 that were in the 10 drop out, and then the 2 were out and want to come back in, you can't do that. So if you want to be a part of this verdict from start to finish, this verdict needs to be 12-0. Every one of you. Also, credibility. The fact that someone has a bunch of degrees and has done research and is on this board and that board and this school, you can believe all that that witness says, nothing of what that witness says, or only part of what that witness says. It's entirely up to you. You also know that the burden of proof we have is preponderance of the evidence, the greater weight and degree of the credible evidence. One place that that can be applied and should be applied is where are these keys? Is it more likely than not that these keys were stored in the location exactly where Dimitri said they were? I will sit down here shortly. The defense will have an opportunity to respond to us, and then Clint and I will have an opportunity to respond to what they say. We look forward to responding to their argument.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take our lunch break now. You still have not heard all of the closing arguments. So, again, please do remember my instructions. So we are going to break for lunch, and we will resume closing arguments at 1:40. So we'll stand in recess until that time.
All rise for the jury. All right, this court will stand in recess until 1:40.